To understand why the Abukuma-class matters, we need to go back, not to today's headlines, but to the Cold War. When these ships were designed, Japan was facing a very different enemy, the Soviet Union. Soviet submarines prowled the Pacific, threatening sea lanes that Japan's survival depended on. Oil, food, raw materials, all flowed by sea. Japan learned one hard truth early: lose control of the sea, and the nation starves. The Abukuma-class was born from that fear. These ships were never meant to duel destroyers or intimidate aircraft carriers. They were built to do one thing exceptionally well: detect, track, and kill submarines before they could strike. That doctrine is suddenly relevant again. Only now, the submarines aren't Soviet, they're Chinese. While the world debates aircraft carriers and hypersonic missiles, China has quietly built one of the largest and fastest-growing submarine fleets on Earth: nuclear-powered attack submarines. Ballistic missile submarines, advanced diesel-electric boats designed for shallow waters. And where do shallow waters dominate? The South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea, the waters surrounding the Philippine archipelago. This is where submarines thrive. China understands this, and Japan understands it even better, which explains why Tokyo chose anti-submarine platforms, not patrol boats, not frigates, not symbolic assets, but sub-hunters. Japan could have transferred these ships to other partners: Vietnam, Indonesia, even India, but it didn't. Why? Because geography matters. The Philippines sits astride critical maritime choke points: the Luzon Strait, the Mindoro Strait, the approaches to Taiwan, and the gateway between the Pacific and the South China Sea. From a strategic standpoint, whoever controls these waters controls movement, escalation, and deterrence. By strengthening the Philippine Navy's anti-submarine capability, Japan is indirectly reinforcing Taiwan contingency planning, U.S.-Japan alliance depth, regional sea lane security. This is not charity. This is strategic outsourcing of deterrence. For decades, the Philippine Navy was shaped around a single assumption: we will never fight a high-end naval war. That mindset is now obsolete. The Abukuma-class forces a doctrinal shift. These ships are not Coast Guard platforms, they are not law enforcement tools, they are fleet assets. Their presence demands continuous sonar operations, coordinated air-sea integration, persistent patrol doctrines. This is a Navy moving from reactive presence to proactive denial. Many critics focus on what's being removed: Harpoons, legacy sensors, but here's the deeper truth. Japan isn't weakening these ships, Japan is depoliticizing them. By removing sensitive systems, Tokyo ensures export compliance, upgrade flexibility, political deniability. What arrives in the Philippines is a clean slate, a hull, propulsion system, and combat-ready architecture waiting to be reborn. That's far more valuable than outdated missiles. Modern naval warfare isn't about fixed weapons. It's about modularity. The Abukuma hull allows new vertical launch options, swappable radar systems, updated combat management software, indigenous or allied weapons integration. This means the Philippines isn't locked into one supplier. Japan opens the door, South Korea can step in, Europe can contribute, the US can integrate. That's how modern navies survive. The CODOG system may be the biggest unseen challenge. For the first time, Philippine sailors must master gas turbine maintenance cycles, high-speed operational doctrines, fuel efficiency trade-offs. This is not trivial. But it's also a rite of passage. Every navy that graduates to high-end operations faces this moment. Fail, and the ships become peer queens. Succeed, and the Navy evolves permanently. Ships are expensive, but training is more expensive. Japan's transfer implicitly demands long-term training detachments, simulator acquisition, Japanese language technical mastery, doctrine rewriting. This is where many transfers fail, not because of bad ships, but because of short-term thinking. The Philippines cannot afford that mistake. Let's be honest, Japan is taking a risk. If these ships are misused, underfunded, or politically sidelined, it reflects poorly on Tokyo. But Japan is betting on something deeper, that the Philippines understands the moment it's living in. A moment where neutrality is no longer protection, where absence invites pressure, where weakness becomes an invitation. China will not respond with warships sailing into Manila Bay. That's not how Beijing operates. Instead, expect this increased maritime militia activity, diplomatic protests, economic signaling, expanded exercises near Philippine waters. This is pressure, not conflict. And pressure is meant to test resolve. 6 warships don't change the balance overnight, but they change perception. They tell allies the Philippines is serious. They tell adversaries the cost of escalation is rising. They tell sailors their navy has a future. Morale matters. And morale wins wars long before missiles are fired. This is where history pauses. The Philippines now stands at a fork. One path leads to fully modernized Abukuma-class escorts, integrated allied operations, and a navy respected across the region. The other leads to budget delays, partial upgrades, missed opportunity. The ships themselves are neutral. The outcome depends entirely on political will. Success means missile integration within 3 to 5 years, full ASW patrol doctrine adoption, interoperability with Japan, US, Australia, and indigenous maintenance capability. That's how these ships become force multipliers. Failure looks quieter, ships tied to the pier, sailors undertrained, systems outdated before installation. History is filled with such examples. This cannot be one of them. Make no mistake, Japan isn't done. If the Philippines succeeds with the Abukuma-class, it unlocks brand new Japanese frigates, joint shipbuilding, shared production lines, a true West Pacific security bloc. This is step 1, not the end. This transfer is not about 6 ships. It's about alignment, about choosing relevance over hesitation, capability over symbolism, preparation over hope. The sea does not forgive weakness, and the next decade will decide who controls it. When the first Abukuma-class destroyer escort raises the Philippine flag, it will mark more than a transfer. It will mark a decision to stand, a decision to invest, a decision to prepare. 6 ships, 1 alliance, a future still undecided. This is West Pacific Watch Defense decoded. Publicly, officials describe the transfer as a capacity-building initiative. Privately, it is something far more calculated. Defense transfers at this scale do not happen overnight. They require years of groundwork, trust-building, legal alignment, and quiet strategic convergence. The Abukuma deal did not begin at the Shangri-La dialogue, it merely surfaced there. Behind the scenes, Japanese and Philippine defense planners have been aligning doctrines, threat assessments, and contingency planning for years. Joint exercises, officer exchanges, port visits, logistics cooperation, each was a brick laid in a foundation that made this moment possible. When Japan finally decided to move, it already knew the answer. This is a question that matters. If the goal were symbolic support, Japan could have transferred 1 ship. If the goal were testing compatibility, 2 would have been enough. But 6 ships allow something far more important: operational continuity. With 6 hulls, the Philippine Navy can maintain constant presence while rotating ships for maintenance, build a dedicated ASW squadron, and sustain training pipelines without capability gaps. This is not a token force. This is a functional formation. Japan didn't just hand over ships, it handed over the ability to operate. There is an element almost never discussed publicly: Taiwan. In any serious contingency involving Taiwan, the Philippines becomes strategically unavoidable. Airspace, sea lanes, and submarine routes all intersect near Philippine waters. Japan understands this. By strengthening Philippine anti-submarine capabilities, Tokyo indirectly reinforces a broader deterrence network without ever mentioning Taiwan by name. This is how modern alliances work: quiet, layered, plausibly deniable. For the Philippine Navy, this transfer accelerates time. Decades of gradual evolution are compressed into a few years. New demands emerge overnight: fleet-level planning, persistent undersea surveillance, integration with air assets, multi-domain coordination. This is no longer a Navy preparing for the future. This is a Navy living in it. Ships are easy compared to doctrine. Doctrine requires mindset change. It requires officers trained not just to command a ship, but to think in formations, threat layers, and time horizons measured in days, not hours. The Abukuma-class forces this transition. These ships do not operate alone. They demand maritime patrol aircraft coordination, helicopter-based ASW operations, data sharing with allies. This is warfare as a system, not a platform. One often overlooked limitation of the Abukuma-class is aviation. These ships were designed in an era when ship-based helicopters were less central than today. This creates both a challenge and an opportunity. The Philippines must decide: modify decks for modern ASW helicopters, rely on shore-based air assets, integrate unmanned aerial systems. Each choice shapes future doctrine, each choice carries cost. Here's where things get interesting. Japan is one of the world's leaders in maritime robotics and unmanned systems. Quietly, Japanese firms have been testing underwater drones, autonomous sonar platforms, and networked sensors. The Abukuma hull could become a mothership for these systems. Imagine autonomous underwater vehicles extending sonar reach, networked detection grids, persistent underwater surveillance. This turns an aging ship into a modern node in a distributed sensor network. That's how relevance is preserved. Defense transfers are rarely just about defense. They are about industry maintenance contracts, upgrade pathways, local fabrication, skills transfer. If handled correctly, the Abukuma program could upgrade Philippine shipyards, create skilled technical jobs, build long-term sustainment capacity. This is where real sovereignty is built, not in hull numbers, but in self-reliance. No discussion of upgrades is complete without mentioning South Korea. Seoul has already demonstrated willingness to export combat management systems, missiles, sensors, training packages. A Japan-Philippines-South Korea triangle is no longer theoretical. It is forming, piece by piece, and China knows it. One of the most divisive questions is missile integration. Should the Philippines prioritize long-range anti-ship missiles or focus exclusively on ASW and denial? This debate cuts to the heart of strategy. Missiles deter by threat, ASW deters by uncertainty. The Abukuma-class is strongest in the latter. A submarine that cannot operate freely is a submarine that cannot threaten. There is another reason ASW matters. It is defensive. It is harder to label anti-submarine patrols as provocative, harder to frame them as escalation. This gives Manila strategic flexibility. Strength without spectacle, capability without rhetoric. Japan understands this calculus perfectly. China now faces a problem. Do nothing and risk erosion of undersea advantage. React aggressively and validate the very concerns driving regional alignment. This is deterrence working in slow motion. Expect China to respond in familiar ways: increased Coast Guard presence, maritime militia shadowing, legal warfare narratives, diplomatic pressure on funding. The goal will not be to stop the transfer. That ship has sailed. The goal will be to slow implementation. Inside the Philippines, the real fight now shifts to Congress. Budgets are where strategy lives or dies. Will lawmakers see these ships as assets or liabilities? Will modernization funding be sustained beyond headlines? This is where many defense visions collapse. Delays compound, training windows close. Systems age, momentum fades. The Abukuma-class does not forgive indecision. These ships demand action. This transfer is a mirror. It reflects how seriously the Philippines takes its maritime identity. An archipelago that neglects its navy invites pressure. History proves this again and again. Look around the region. Nations that invested early in ASW now shape their environments. Those that hesitated are reacting, not leading. The Philippines has a rare chance to choose which side of history it joins. Alliances are not announced, they are assembled. Piece by piece, the Abukuma transfer is one such piece. Combined with EDCA expansion, joint patrols, intelligence sharing. A quiet architecture is emerging. Not a block, a network. Flexible, resilient. Hard to dismantle, treaties can be debated. Statements can be ignored, capabilities cannot. Once ships are operational, they change facts on the water. And facts are stubborn things. At the center of all this are sailors. Young officers stepping onto ships older than they are, yet carrying responsibilities heavier than any generation before them. They will define whether this transfer becomes legend or footnote. Right now, the story is unfinished. The ships have not arrived. The upgrades are not installed. The doctrine is still forming. This is the moment where futures are shaped quietly before history notices. Japan has made its move. The question now is simple. Will the Philippines rise to meet it? Because in the West Pacific, indecision is not neutrality. It is vulnerability. 6 ships are coming. What follows depends on what the nation chooses to build around them. This is West Pacific Watch. Defense Decoded.